Welcome to the deep dive. We're here to really dig into your source material and pull out the insights.
Yeah.
So when you hear the word familiar, I bet your mind, like mine, probably jumps straight to that classic image, right?
Mhm.
The black cat, maybe perched next to a witch, very Halloween-y, almost kitsch.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that image, I mean, it's everywhere culturally, but it's really just the tip of the iceberg of something, well, it's truly global and ancient.
Right.
Our sources pull us right out of that novelty idea.
Okay.
They force us to sort of redefine things. A familiar spirit, it's not just, an animal helper.
Right.
Across history, it's described more like an ancient, non-human soulmate.
Well, soulmate.
Yeah. And that counterpart could be an animal, sure, but also a plant, maybe a spirit of a dead ancestor, or even something like a star or planet.
Soulmate is such a, well, powerful word. It sounds almost romantic,
Mm-hmm.
which seems odd for something linked to the occult or even, historically demons.
It is a strong word, and it helps us get at the nature of the bond, I think. It's interesting, too, that the term soulmate itself is actually pretty modern.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Samuel Taylor Coleridge coined it back in 1822. He defined it as this necessary, non-ordinary relationship needed for, human fulfillment and that deep sense of connection, something beyond the everyday. That's really
Right.
what we're diving into today.
Right. So we're going way beyond the black cat stereotype. We're going to unpack uh, the surprising origins of the word itself, the conflicting roles these spirits played throughout history, and even the sort of psychological angle
Mhm.
across cultures, religion, even science.
Mhm.
Okay, so let's start unpacking. What does familiar actually mean here in this older context?
Well, the etymology is fascinating. It comes from the Latin word famulus.
Famulus.
Yeah, meaning servant. And it's the same root we get the word family from.
Ah, okay. Servant and family. Interesting connection.
It is. And the familiar's traditional role, especially when you look at European witchcraft sources, was really one of devotional servitude, like a spiritual assistant or midwife helping out their bonded human.
That straight away suggests a power dynamic, doesn't it? A hierarchy. If the familiar is the famulus, the servant, then the human has to be in charge.
Precisely. The sources are quite clear on this. The whole relationship depends on the human establishing and, crucially, maintaining dominion. It's almost like that idea in Genesis, Adam naming the animals, setting up that order.
Right.
And if you lose that control, well, the stories say the results could be catastrophic. There was the famous legend of King Solomon.
Oh, yeah, with the ring.
Exactly. He supposedly had this special ring to control legions of spirits. But when he was tricked, lost the ring. Those same spirits turned on him, attacked him mercilessly until he got it back.
So keeping your spiritual house in order was absolutely vital. Okay, so this control, this dominion, it was maintained through some kind of exchange you mentioned. What did that involve? What did the human have to give?
It could start quite simply, sometimes just offerings like food, maybe alcohol, sweets, leaving out meals for ancestors on an altar, that kind of thing.
Simple enough.
But historically, looking worldwide, the preferred offering for spirits seems to have been blood.
Blood.
Yeah, I mean, this practice goes back millennia. You see it evolve from, literal blood offerings to animal sacrifice. And you could even argue it filters into things like the symbolic Christian communion, the idea of consuming the blood of the scapegoat, Jesus.
But the European witch trials, they took this blood idea and really sensationalized it, didn't they? With the whole witch's mark thing.
Oh, absolutely. That became a huge focus. The witch's mark was treated as key evidence, especially in the 16th and 17th centuries.
Right.
Accusers would claim witches fed their familiars their own blood, and they'd look for some kind of odd teat or maybe a supernumerary nipple. There's one trial record from 1621 describing it as branched at the top as a teat.
Ugh, that's disturbing imagery.
It is, and the implication was deeply unsettling. It suggested the witch was almost breastfeeding a lost child, maybe stillborn, who had somehow reincarnated as this animal familiar, fulfilling a kind of twisted maternal bond through the supernatural.
Okay, so this concept of a spiritual counterpart, it clearly goes way beyond just European folklore. Let's pivot a bit. What other forms did these allies take around the world?
Yeah, definitely not just a European thing. If we look globally, you see strong parallels. For one, you have shamanic totems.
Totems, right.
You find these everywhere, really, and they're often linked conceptually to family. The word totem itself might come from an Algonquian word, dudem, meaning something like his sibling kin or family. Think of totem poles in North America. They represent a tribe's ancestors, their allies, both physical and spiritual.
Got it. And then Further south, Mesoamerica had the Nagual, right?
Yes, the Nagual, a really powerful concept. It's like a spirit animal counterpart used by shamans. It acts as a kind of double, a source of power, often linked to abilities like
A
shape-shifting.
double.
Yeah, and it's seen as distinct from the tonal, which is more like the individual human soul that, ends when you die. The Nagual is the enduring part, the unlimited powerful spirit. It's described as a place where power hovers.
Okay, fascinating. And then if we shift way over to the east, to China, the big ones are the Dragon Kings.
Oh, definitely. The dragon, the Tianlong, was considered the ultimate familiar there, the most powerful masculine or yang spirit, heavily linked to heaven, controlling the weather.
Controlling the weather.
Yeah, but the real insight there, I think, isn't just the weather control itself. It's that by adopting the dragon spirit, the emperor was politically legitimizing his rule. He was merging the power of nature with the power of the state, claiming a kind of divine right.
That makes sense.
Even the mythical founders of Chinese culture, Fuxi and Nuwa, they were often depicted as half human, half dragon.
So the familiar relationship had practical political uses too, not just spiritual ones. Okay, let's circle back to the West for a minute, specifically to the black cat, because its history is just wild, isn't it? Total reversal. How did this animal, which was revered in places like Egypt,
Absolutely revered, patrons of the goddess Bast, symbols of immortality.
right? How did that animal suddenly become this symbol of bad luck and, well, demonism in Europe?
It seems the beginning of the end was political. When the Roman Emperor Theodosius I started enforcing Christianity, this was around 379 to 395 CE, he apparently used the fact that black cats were so common in Egyptian households.
As an easy marker.
Exactly, as an easy way to identify and persecute pagans. Owning a black cat basically put a target on your back for heresy.
Wow, just owning a cat.
Pretty much. And this association, this persecution, it festered for centuries and then culminated with, well, extreme prejudice. In 1233, Pope Gregory the Next issued a papal bull called Vox and Rama,
Ox and Rama.
and it specifically declared black cats demonic entities.
This was outright demonic.
Yes. And that decree essentially greenlit their mass eradication across Europe. It was a purge, and it was likely so severe it probably had real ecological consequences, messing with rodent populations and agriculture.
That's a huge historical impact stemming from, well, superstition and politics.
Okay, let's switch gears again. There seems to be a deep contradiction in some of the sources regarding how you attract these spirits. You have desire versus total restraint. We just talked about the black cat linked to persecution. But other sources seem to suggest raw desire is key.
Right, that brings us to this concept called the fetch.
A fetch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was often described as being tied to the sort of animal sexual nature of the witch. You had this magnetic, attractive quality, which is apparently where we get the word fetching, meaning attractive.
Oh, didn't know that.
Yeah, it's like a concentration of desire. Sigmund Freud, much later, kind of linked this idea to the libido, driven by imagination, creating what he called a phantasm, like imaginational double.
Okay.
And some sources suggest that if you, say, intensely focus on a sexual fantasy, you could sort of charge up the fetch with the power to magnetically attract that person or entity.
Okay, so if that raw desire acts like a magnet, where does the whole idea of disciplined self-control come in? Fasting, abstinence. That's the critical counterpoint. Disciplined self-domination practices like deep fasting, strict celibacy, these were said to attract much more powerful familiars.
More powerful. So restraint brings bigger rewards.
That seems to be the idea. The goal was to take that potent magnetic force of the libido and consciously redirect it away from human partners, channeling it entirely toward the spirit world instead.
That sounds very much like the techniques used by famous priestesses, oracles,
Yeah.
people who channeled prophecy.
Absolutely. A prime example would be the Vestal Virgins of Rome.
Right, of course.
I mean, that was a sacred institution that lasted for 1,000 years. Their celibacy was explicit. It was about reserving themselves entirely for the spirit or the god. And through that devotion, they believed they received supernatural insight, psychic abilities. It links right back to that ancient idea of the womb or even the tomb as a kind of spiritual gateway.
And the Oracle of Delphi, that's maybe the most visceral example of that kind of union, isn't it?
It really is. The Pythia, the priestess, literally sat over a crack in the earth. She let psychoactive gases rise up and enter her body. Some accounts even suggest specifically through the vulva or womb.
Wow.
It was described as a kind of chemical union with an earth spirit, a sacred marriage, a hieros gamos. It parallels myths like Pandora, whose womb or box, the Pythos, received Prometheus's creative fire. And, of course, the Virgin Mary.
Right. Impregnated by the Holy Spirit.
Impregnated by the Holy Spirit, yeah, after the angel Gabriel informed her it would happen.
That brings up another point, though. The sources also talk about negative spirit encounters, right? The adversarial ones, like succubi and incubi.
Definitely. Succubi and incubi were framed as demon lovers who forced sexual union. It wasn't reciprocal, it was predatory.
Right.
But what's ironic, and some sources point this out, is that Mary's encounter with the Holy Spirit, well, it also involved a kind of non-consensual force, didn't it? She was told what was going to happen. She wasn't exactly asked for consent.
That's a challenging comparison.
It is. Yet her offspring, Jesus, is deemed divine and desirable. Compare that to the offspring of the fallen watcher angels and human women in other traditions, the Nephilim. They were often seen as monstrous, destructive, the result of a forbidden, non-consensual union.
That really grounds the theological stakes involved.
Yeah.
Okay, let's shift perspective one more time to the internal familiar. How does this spirit guide manifest entirely inside the mind?
Well, in ancient Greece, for instance, hearing a voice, a guiding intelligence inside you, wasn't necessarily seen as illness. It could be a gift. Think of Socrates and his daemon.
His inner voice, right.
Exactly. Its root meaning is something like divider or provider of fortunes. And famously, Socrates' daemon mostly just told him what not to do. It was like an internal warning system, a censor.
And the Oracle of Delphi actually declared Socrates the wisest man, partly because he listened to that inner guide.
Precisely. He was guided by this internal force. And this idea flows very naturally into the Roman concept of the genius.
Look at a genius.
Yeah, and what's fascinating here is the linguistic link. Genius is inherently tied to the word gene, to family, ancestry, bloodline.
Ah, okay. Like genetic.
Right, so the genius was sometimes interpreted almost literally as genetic memory, like your ancestors offering advice, maybe grandfatherly wisdom from within.
Wow. And this spiritual idea, the genius, somehow became foundational to the scientific method. That seems counterintuitive.
It does, but it's a crucial connection. René Descartes, the father of modern philosophy and the scientific method.
I think, therefore I am.
That guy. He actually used this concept. He employed an internal adversary, what he called his evil genius doubt.
An evil genius?
Yeah, like an internal debater. He used it to systematically doubt everything, to arrive at philosophical truth through negation, by eliminating all falsehoods. And that process became the basis for the scientific method we still use.
That's incredible, using an internal adversarial familiar to find truth.
And the irony is, he claimed he received the entire method, fully formed, in a dream. Not exactly the empirical origin story you'd expect for empiricism.
That really is ironic. So how does this translate into, like, a modern scientific view? You mentioned genetics earlier.
Yeah, the idea that our ancestry stretches way beyond just human lineage. Well, it's strongly supported by modern biology, specifically evolutionary developmental biology, or evo-devo.
Evo-devo.
Right. We know we have dormant genes in our DNA called atavisms. These are like genetic throwbacks, echoes from deep evolutionary history, dating back potentially to the very beginning of complex life.
So ancient genetic code still inside us. Before we connect that back, you mentioned toolkit genes, like Hox genes. What are those exactly?
Right. Hox genes are fundamental. Think of them as the master control genes, the architectural blueprints for building an animal body. They dictate things like where limbs go, how many body segments an organism has, and they're incredibly conserved across almost all animal life. Flies, mice, humans, we share remarkably similar Hox genes. They're like the universal biological toolkit.
Okay, the universal toolkit. So the idea is...
Well, the idea is that maybe when ancient cultures talked about animal totems or familiar spirits, they were, perhaps unconsciously, accessing this deep, latent, shared genetic data, tapping into the memory encoded in those universal toolkit genes.
So our familiar isn't just some external guide. It could be an expression of our own deep biological shared memory.
That's one way to interpret it, yeah. And connecting with that profound shared memory, that internal lineage, is actually the ultimate goal in many esoteric traditions. It's often called the alchemical wedding, or the hieros gamos, the sacred marriage.
Just sacred marriage again.
Yes, or union with what Aleister Crowley popularized as the Holy Guardian Angel, HGA. The ultimate goal is to unify the individual human soul with this deeper spirit or universal self, allowing the person to sort of shine with divine light, connecting their internal memory back to the source of all life.
Wow. Okay, so wrapping this up, what does it all really mean? We've covered so much ground here. We've seen the familiar spirit as, yes, the witch's servant, but also maybe as genetic memory, sometimes a force of persecution, other times the source of prophecy, even, bizarrely, a foundation for the scientific method.
I think the most consistent thread looking across all these ancient cultures, no matter what they called it, ancestor, daemon, genius, angel, totem, is this persistent narrative that crucial knowledge, civilization itself, things like language, science, agriculture, came from some kind of divine intervention, some interaction between humans and entities or forces perceived as being beyond human.
So these familiar spirits are, in a way, constantly shaping our reality, even if we don't consciously recognize it.
It seems that way, yeah. The stories consistently point to this relationship as foundational, and maybe, for a final thought, considering that our genes literally contain the biological memory of essentially all life on Earth, and these spirits, these guides, are so often described as interdimensional or maybe celestial ancestors. What if the real work involved in connecting with a truly powerful, familiar spirit isn't about looking outward for some separate master or servant?
But looking inward.
Maybe it's about challenging your own perceived limitations and really grappling with the idea that the boundaries of your own family, your own ancestry might actually extend all the way back to the stars.